This is the Hope Not Note podcast,
where we answer your questions and share inspirational stories to fill your soul with hope.
Our mission is to empower hope to those who have been plagued by note.
I'm Dr. Dylan Caswell.
And I'm Brandy.
And we're here to bring you out of the note and into hope.
Welcome to the Hope Not Note podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We are recording this in the morning, and I have my coffee with me, and Dylan just chugged his in like 3 seconds.
I'm a chugger. I like it when it's warm. I don't want it to cool down, so I chug it.
Meanwhile, I'm just gonna sip on it the entire recording, and I hope it is all right with y'all. But
shout out to the chuggers.
Shout out to the chuggers. We're gonna dive right into our question. This is from a listener named Tess, and she asks, how do I combat a victim mentality?
Tess, thank you for the question. I think we should start with what is a victim mindset or mentality.
Yeah.
For people who may not know what that is. I think the easiest way to explain it, it's the woe is me mindset.
Mm-hmm.
The bad things always happen to me. I'm the most unlucky person in the world. All of these things are working against me. A victim mindset will give you all the doubts to stop you in your track and not allow you to achieve the desires placed on your heart. That is the quick definition of a victim mentality or mindset. So on the other end of this, we have what we call the hope mindset or the champion mindset. And this mindset says, I'm going to face adversity, I'm going to face suffering, but I'm willing to persevere through the suffering. I'm willing to persevere because I know that retrospectively that I'll understand why I had to go through that adversity. Mm-hmm. Retrospectively, I can look at that event and say, wow, that actually helped to shape me. When we look at what are the strategies to develop a hope mindset or a championship mindset instead of this victim mentality, I think we have to, let's look at, what is hope? Self-agency, goals, and a pathway. So strategy number one is self-agency. The ability to recognize that you have the choice to respond instead of reacting to situations. You get the ability to say, I'm going through a hardship, but I'm going to overcome this. That is self-agency. When we get more into reacting to situations, we kind of start to filter more towards that victim mindset or victim mentality. So we have to have the ability to respond to situations. I think the ability to respond to situations, it lies in knowing that we don't have enough information as you're going through a hardship to understand why you're going through that hardship. I've shared on this podcast before the story of the farmer, the wise old farmer, and I want to share that story, but I'm going to share a different one that paints a same picture, but just different people. I remember this was years ago, working with a client who got kicked by a cow that led to a fracture. You would hear that and say, wow, that's unlucky. Like, that cow was out to get you, right? She is the victim in this scenario because the cow kicked her, led to a fracture. But then the story continues. Because what ended up happening is because of the kick that she got in the body, the area of the body that she received the kick, that led to her getting imaging done on her spine and on her head and in her brain. What they found on her spine was a tumor.
Oh.
That had not been found before, and she wasn't necessarily having symptoms per se from it. She's a farmer. She's tough. Mm-hmm. And didn't know that this was there. This tumor was a bad tumor. It was one that could have spread aggressively. They found it and were able to remove it. None of that would have happened if the cow hadn't kicked her. So now all of a sudden, instead of her perceiving that she was a victim that was harassed violently by this cow, she now looks at that cow and says, wow, thank you. Because you doing that led me to a better outcome. When we have more information down the road, that gives us perspective. And that's the second thing that we need for the ability to get out of a victim mindset is perspective. And that perspective, like my perspective has changed over the years. I initially, when this whole mission started, my perspective was I'm going to end suffering. No one's going to go through adversity anymore. Well, come to find out, I don't have the ability to do that for people.
Yeah.
Nobody has the ability to do that for people. We are all going to go through adversity. We are all going to go through suffering. But what we can do in that is take control of the controllables. What's happening between the ears? What are the thoughts I have about myself? And what is the perspective? And I get it when you're in it and it's hard and you get kicked by a cow and you have a fracture and you're not able to work, things can seem real bad. But then all of a sudden you get this other info and all of a sudden you're excited about that event. So when you're in it, you have to have the perspective that down the road, this is going to teach you something. This is going to develop a skill set that you didn't have before. I kind of look at life as being a bunch of graded exposures. And what does that mean? It means as we get older and you take on more responsibility, you take on more responsibility, you take on more adversity. Like they come hand in hand. You're not going to earn responsibility without having adversity. I know we have a lot of friends that are new parents, and I think they would very much attest to this of like raising a child is a huge responsibility that comes with a lot of adversity. Responsibility comes with adversity, and we're not going to get rid of the adversity. But what you can do is continuously rise up to the challenge by having the perspective that if you get through this challenge, you're now better equipped for the next challenge. You know what to do the next time. And we hear our friends say all the time, transitioning to having more kids is hard, but also not because you already have the experience. And to me, that's what life is. It's a bunch of graded exposures to keep yourself building and becoming more resilient, more adaptable, to give yourself this perspective that you can do hard things and that you can persevere through the adversity, which leads into the third point that I would want to talk about with when we're looking at how do I get out of this victim mindset? Well, we know that the brain works by prediction. We know that input changes output. We have to change the input that you're getting. You can look throughout your day, throughout your week, throughout your life, and you can find a bunch of events that did not go your way. Because I think it was a Georgia Tech coach gave a speech a couple years ago on winning, and it was a beautiful speech. But paraphrasing it, winning doesn't care about you. It doesn't care how much work that you've put in. It's not tied to you. So this idea of winning, well, what is winning? What does that mean? And to me, winning means that you're able to put your best foot forward every single day and try to reach the desires placed on your heart, whatever that may be at whatever season it is in your life, but not staying complacent. That's a win. Because there's a huge part of the population that has very much accepted complacency. I'm just here to chill, do the bare minimum, get by, and we'll just kind of ride it out. No, that's not a hope mindset. That's not a champion mindset. Winning is not accepting complacency. To not accept complacency, we have to go through adversity. To overcome adversity, we have to remain with self-agency goals and have pathways to get through that adversity. Those pathways change the input to change your output. Stop taking in evidence that this is leaning towards this victim mindset. So people communicating to you, oh, that's not fair to you. Oh man, you are so unlucky. Hey, no, I don't need that input. There's enough of that. I need the input that says, hey, what you're going through is tough. I can't even imagine what you're going through right now. But I do know that you're tough. I do know that you may not feel right now like you're going to get through this, but I know that you can. Well, how do you know that? Well, let's do a quick audit on your life and let's see what you've overcome to get to this point, to have that responsibility that led to that adversity. And when we start making that list, I bet you're going to be pretty dang proud.
Hmm.
And not in a boastful way, but in a way that says, you know what? I can do this. Like, look what I've accomplished. I remember that time where my back was against the wall and I fought and I persevered. And I now look back and that's one of the best memories that I have. So we have to change the input to change the output. And I love sharing this study with the victim mindset because it plays in really well to what we're looking for is what we're going to find,
Hmm.
right? Because our brain is looking for the input, it's looking for certainty, and it's looking to see, is this congruent? Is this aligned? So it's the famous Dartmouth scar study in which they took people and the makeup artists, they drew or painted a fake scar on their face. And then the research subjects were said, go into the interview, write down how many times you felt discriminated against because of the scar on your face. So they're going into the interview. Before they get into the interview, another makeup artist or the same makeup artist, they stop the person and said, oh my gosh, I got to touch that up for you a little bit. So they pretend they're touching it up, but they wipe it off. They go into the interview thinking the scar's on their face, but the scar's not on their face. And they write down how many times they felt discriminated because of the scar on their face. They come back to the other side, they sit down with the researcher, and they present a long list of how many ways they were discriminated because of this non-existent scar on their face that they thought existed on their face. Victim mentality.
Hmm.
When you look for those things, you will find them. So what if we look towards the things that show that you do have self-agency? What if we look towards the things that show that you're a champion? Focus on those. Bring those back up. And you may be going, well, come on, like winning a game in high school sports or youth sports. Come on, that doesn't count. Yes, it does.
Hmm.
Count it. And if you're saying, I don't have anything to look back on that shows me that I can persevere, that I can get over this. Start with something today.
Hmm.
What's one small challenge that you can take on that you can overcome? How do we start to build momentum that you can take on a small challenge and say, you know what? I was successful.
Hmm.
Start small. Maybe the challenge, I'm going to read a book. Don't read a book in a day. Read a page.
Hmm.
Get the book. Start there. Build the momentum. That's all, it's all graded exposure so that when that bigger challenge comes, you're ready for it.
Hmm.
You've practiced, you've been there.
Hmm. Well, I love those three steps, or there's three like key points. The last one really stuck out to me, especially with the input changes the output, because I'm thinking of situations where you can't necessarily, or you perceive that you can't change the input.
Mm.
For example, you're a stay-at-home mom with three kids under the age of 4,
Mm.
and you're like nursing, but there's sleep regressions going on, so you're not sleeping, your kids are hardly sleeping, and there's all this like chaos, right? You think that you can't change that input because it's life circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, with step two of changing your perspective, you can shift your perspective to not take that input on in a negative light. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, very, very, very much so. And what's cool with our business is we get to work with young athletes. We get to work with uh, athletes that are new parents, and we get to work with athletes that are grandparents. And it's so funny because it will, like within an hour, it will kind of shift gears, right? So the young parent, I'm barely sleeping. I'm ready to lose it. I have all this stuff going on. I'm ready to explode. And then you talk to the grandparent athlete, and they're like, I would give up anything
Mm.
to have lack of sleep, to like have my baby back in my arms
Aw.
for that night. But it's two very different seasons.
Hmm.
And the reason the grandparent can say that is because they've already went through it. They've already kind of done that. And
Hmm.
now they're on the other side of it and they realize how special those moments were.
Hmm.
And I know it's got to be hard when, you know, we talk about sleep a lot and what's the despair between, uh, you know, being completely into a victim mentality, into a hope mentality, sleep.
Hmm.
Like the bridge between despair and hope is sleep. And if you're not getting that, it's hard. But then it's interesting hearing on the other side of this of like, yeah, like I give up those hours of sleep to like
Hmm.
hear the baby cry again, to hold the baby, to feed it, just to love on it
Hmm.
a little bit. And when you're in it, I imagine like that's probably not the perspective
Yeah.
that you have. But I think in those moments where it seems like, man, I can't really change much of this right now. Well, the biggest thing that you can change is what's happening between the years.
Yeah.
If nothing else is changeable, if like sleep schedule can't change, kids, sleep regressions, if all this is going on and it doesn't seem like a reality that you can actually change the environment, well, you change your thoughts.
Yeah.
And the thoughts are accepting that like it's okay to say, I'm tired,
Hmm.
I'm exhausted, but I've always wanted to do this.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to be a parent. I've always wanted to be a mom or a father, husband, whatever it may be. Like I always wanted this. Here I am. Now I get to do this.
Yeah.
I've gone through hard things before. I know this is a season, and I know that after the season, I might be able to get some of that sleep back.
Hmm.
But I know it's well worth it to see these kids be raised.
Yeah, it's worth the sacrifice. And granted, like we don't have kids yet, and so we're giving this advice, before being in that season. And so I do want to say that. And I hope that we can walk through that season gracefully when it does come. But I also think that this is where having a mantra or having, like the encouragement cards that I
Yeah.
used to use, things like that can really help you throughout the day when you feel like you can't, quote unquote, can't change your input because all of the chaos in your life. You can, and one way to do that is by having that little thing that you can always go back to, right? Like
Yeah.
you might not be able to take 60 minutes out of your day to go journal or to even listen to a podcast or something like that. Hopefully you can and you're
Yeah.
listening to this one. But the reality is having some sort of mantra or thing that is encouraging you and grounding you in who you are as an individual and grounding you in truth and giving yourself grace, I think is going to help a lot,
Yeah.
especially if you're in that season. I know for me, like even just a couple weeks ago, I kind of had a little breakdown of spiral of victim mentality and like I hope not nope's our thing. Like who am I to be feeling that way, right? But the reality is like I was having a rough day, a rough couple weeks. There was a lot of external things going on. And instead of being aware, I was allowing myself to keep like taking on the input that was not lifting me up. And so I had to have a reality check and I had to go back to the basics and I had to go back to keeping perspective. I had to go back to remembering what hope is, remembering what having a champion mindset is. And that was just a couple weeks ago for me. And so I know that other people go through this a lot. I hope that this advice and perspective can really bless them and bless the listeners.
Yeah, quick example of having the mantra, right? You have to have it before you're in the situation.
Mhm.
But if not, it's not like it's too late and you can't use one.
Yeah.
But one example that I can share with you guys is that one of our clients, crazy schedule, super busy. Like everyone's busy, but the schedule is very, very busy. And it got to a point where the thought was, how much more can I take on of this? I can't keep doing this. I don't have anything left. And that was what's running through her head. So what happens when that runs through your head? Your brain goes, got it. Don't have enough left. Let's go ahead and make you tired so that you have to lay down.
Yeah.
And then we get upset that we're laying down. Like, no, we guided that to happening.
Yeah.
So we changed what was happening between the years. And the mantra that this particular client uses is, I can do hard things.
Hmm.
That's it. So when the next challenge arises in the day, and I shouldn't say challenge, I said challenges, schedule switching and all the stuff that's occurring, she pauses, she takes a deep breath, and she reminds herself, I can do hard things. And then she does them
Yeah.
because she reminds herself that she can.
Hmm.
And it sounds simple, but it's very, very powerful. Trina, I want to ask you quickly, when you were going through that and you started to get into the victim mindset, what were the things that allowed you, other than reflecting back onto hope, self-agency, goals, pathway, like what was something that you used to switch back into a champion mindset?
Well, one, I used the supportive community.
Mhm.
And so I went to you, my lovely husband, but then I also talked with a couple friends of mine, and it really grounded me back into like one, giving me the space to kind of have the little meltdown. Like I needed to get those emotions out
Mhm.
because I was bottling them up. But then all of my friends that I turn to are people who are always going to speak truth to me, even if it's hard.
Mm.
And so having community that will do that, I think that was a huge part that led in me having, you know, when we speak of hope, we talk about the pathways. For me, I know when I'm struggling, one of the pathways that I can use to get back to my authentic and true self is leaning on community and allowing them to help me. So that was a huge pathway for me. But the other thing was journaling and again, like getting that all out and doing it in a prayerful setting. And then I had to go back to what have, like we talked earlier, but like what have I accomplished and overcome in the past? And for me, in that specific setting, I was reminded of, oh, my theme last year was confidence. And right now, I feel very insecure and like a complete mess and have zero confidence. And so let me go back to those lessons and that truth that I learned when I had a whole year that I was focusing on confidence. And so I was able to reflect on that, but then remind myself if is the year of abundance, and I'm not taking confidence and leading that into abundance, then I'm doing a disservice to my theme this year. And my theme this year is abundance. And so I took time to like really reflect on those different things. In addition to that, and this is the last thing I'm going to say because you asked me a question before I could ask you a question, and I wanted to ask you this question because you had said one of our clients, her mantra is I can do hard things. I think it would be nice if we can give our listeners a couple other mantras maybe that they can pull from. So one of them is I can do hard things. For me, in situations where I go back to feeling the victim mentality or whatever, like look, I was in chronic pain for like 8 to 10 years. That entire time I had a victim mentality. I was woe is me. I was doing what I thought was my best to, at least with the resources I had, to like keep perspective. But the reality was most days I was struggling and really on the struggle bus. And one of the first things that you told me when I met you that I always go back to is I have a positive life experience because I think that when you get into the woe is me victim mentality, you think that life around you is out to get you.
Yeah.
And if you can remind yourself, no, I have a positive life experience, that is a game changer because then you're not looking at the things around you or the things in your past as like, oh, this adversity, like, yeah, I overcame it, but I went through the adversity, and like you're focusing more on like the suck rather than the good and the
Yeah.
hope. And so for me, a couple weeks ago, but then in general, I go back to I have a positive life experience. Saying that is really like pivotal for me and reminds me that I do have a positive life experience. So I'm gonna share maybe one more that a listener can grab, but why don't you share one or two as well?
Awesome. So I'm going to share those, but I want to pull out one important thing from what you shared.
Okay.
One important thing, and then I'll share a couple mantras. I'll share the ones that I use
Okay.
for myself. But one thing I want to pull out that's important is that, and I want to make this clear, you said when I'm struggling and moving towards a victim mindset, I can lean on community that speaks truth to me versus I'm calling people so they can tell me how bad that I have it.
Mm,
Those are two very different things.
yeah.
One is a self-agency in responding and help me back into a hope and champion mindset. The other one is help me stay in a victim mindset by telling me how bad it is. So I want to just point that out of like You're like, well, yeah, I call my friends all the time. They let me know that, like, yeah, that sucks.
Mhm.
Oh man, like, yeah, the world's out to get you. Not helpful if you
No.
want to get out of the victim
Yeah.
mindset, but having community that can speak truth to you and bring you back to the other part of this, the champion mindset, super important. Super important. So a couple mantras that I use for myself. I'd say my biggest nope that I've experienced through my life is that I'm not enough.
Mhm.
And a lot of different examples that brought that mentality on of I'm not enough. But when I think that I'm not enough, I kind of sink over to this victim mentality, like oh, I can't go do anything. Like who am I to be? And not saying that like humility is a great thing, but there's also the like knowing that you are loved and that you are enough, and it's not dependent on what you have or what you do. So for me, the mantra that I use when I start to feel down and oh, this is hard is I'm loved and I'm enough. That's it. I'm loved and I'm enough. Sometimes I'll use if I get nervous with like a talk, because yes, I get nervous when I give talks.
Mhm.
I will say, you belong here. You're supposed to be here. If you were not supposed to be here, then you wouldn't be here. But you are here. You're supposed to be here. So those are some mantras that I use. We have some people that will use that are going through an injury or pain or having a lot of doubts to allow their brain to kind of switch from protective mode to like, hey, let's thrive a little bit. They'll use I'm safe.
Mhm.
I'm strong and I'm safe. I'm strong and I'm safe. Simple. They got to be simple. It
Mhm.
can't be this paragraph long mantra. Wait, what was that again? Okay, the second line was this, and then the third line, and a comma went there. No, short, simple, to the point.
You could use a paragraph if you have it like posted on your mirror in your bathroom because then you could read it like at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day. So I will say that, but that's not something that you can think of. Like you can't I'd be very impressed if you had the whole thing memorized that you could do when your kids are screaming in the back seat of your car while you're on your way to get groceries,
Yeah.
or in the grocery store in the midst of chaos. Like, you probably can't regurgitate that entire paragraph, but having like a one-liner or a two-liner. And the reality is it comes down to whatever setting you're in currently and what you know your natural tendency is when you're having like a day that feels like it's up against you, where your brain goes. So
Hmm.
for me, like I need to go to the I have a positive life experience, but I also use the I'm safe, I'm strong often as well. Or I will say I'm capable, I'm confident, or I got this, or anything like that really. But it's what is the setting and what is my natural tendency to go to, and how do I speak truth into that within that setting? So I hope that these mantras were helpful. Is there
Yeah.
anything else that you want to
Oh, I'm
share?
so glad you asked. Yes. Last
Before Hope
last
Stories?
point, and then we'll go into hope stories, is also that, and not that this is like a victim mindset, but there are those the days that are tough that it doesn't feel like things go your way. And we're not saying that a champion mindset is looking at every day and going, everything went as planned. Like
No.
that is not a champion mindset. That's an unrealistic
Hmm.
mindset. That's false hope. The reality is like they're gonna have days that are not smooth whatsoever. But the champion and the hope mindset in those days is at the end of the day, you're not sitting there going, oh man, it was
Hmm.
so hard on me. But you get to the end of the day and you just go, look, it did not go my way. There was a lot of obstacles that came up, but I still showed up and I did what I could do. It wasn't what I wanted it to be,
Hmm.
but I didn't give up.
Hmm.
I didn't let it just shut me down. I pushed forward with what I could push forward with. We see it all the time in business, we see it in sports. Every practice isn't going to be your best practice, but it can be if you exert some effort, even when things are not going your way, to achieve one little small thing. And sometimes that little small thing is I showed up and I gave the effort that I could. That's a win.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So before we go into hope stories, I'm just gonna kind of close that segment with saying The reason I appreciate the person who asked the question asking victim mentality is because you said this before, but when I think of the word mindset, I think that you're like fixed on that,
Yeah.
right? And so you're not fixed on a victim mentality.
Oh
Like
yeah. Let's
you're
go.
not stuck with that. However, having a champion mindset or a hope mindset, you should be fixed on.
Yeah.
Ideally, you should strive for that each day and commit to that. And like Dylan said, it's going to look different every day. We we have our cup and sometimes our cup is not completely full at the beginning of the day and we can't necessarily outpour as much liquid one day as the next day. And that's okay. We're on different levels each day, but we do our best, and that's what having a hope or a champion mindset is all about. Having a victim mentality is not about that, but you can shift that and change that. So we talk about hope in our nopes. You can't just get rid of nope. You have to change it. You have to transform it. And so our goal with this is you can't just get rid of a victim mentality. You need to fill it with something. And what you're going to fill it with is the champion and the hope mindset.
Yeah.
Mic drop into hope stories.
Great point. No, it's like back to football, right? Ready, set, putt.
Mhm.
Like when the quarterback says set, that generally means you get into a position and you stay there. And then the hut is go.
Mhm.
So I love that like set makes it seem like stay there, you're stuck there. Or mentality is taking you out of that and saying, no, you can shift this.
Mhm.
And and I also want to add on to that we also want to recognize that like bad things happen.
Yeah,
Like traumas happen.
it's real.
It's real.
Mhm.
And we're not saying that if you've been through something like that you are not a victim. Like there's a lot of cases in which like you were a victim. What we're saying is that although that happened, you don't have to stay there.
Mhm.
Just wanted to make that point clear.
Yeah,
Probably should have done that earlier, but
it's good.
yeah.
They're still listening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, my hope story is very simple, very quick, but I was at a local grocery store. Typically, I go to Aldi because Aldi is where it's at and it's less expensive. And it's fun and have great things. But I went to like the local Wegmans up in upstate New York. If you're from this area, you know about the glory and the expensiveness of Wegmans. We don't typically shop there because we can go to Aldi. However, there are certain things that you can't get at one that you can get at Wegmans, and so I went to Wegmans. Anyways, all that to say, as I was leaving, I ran into somebody who used to work out at the 6 a.m. workout at the gym where Dylan and I met, and we're friends on Facebook, and so like I kind of stay updated with this person. But she's like, I don't know, maybe in her 60s or something, and she was one of my buddies that I would work out. I like worked out with a bunch of like 50 and 60-year-old women. It was great. Um, but I was so encouraged because she said hi and she said, I love what you and Dylan are doing. I started listening to your podcast recently. And so I
Oh,
just wanted to give her a little shout out. And I was just encouraged that, someone from the gym that Dylan and I met got to like is listening to the podcast. And maybe there's others too, but I like ran
yeah.
into her locally and it just made me smile. So hello, if you're listening.
Yeah. And I want to point out that I think I know which one you're talking about. And like, what a phenomenal athlete.
Yeah.
Like,
She was a rock star. She
like
is a rock
she's a
star.
rock star. She is awesome.
Hmm.
My hope story, it kind of goes along with the theme of the episode. And not going to share names just to protect, but one of my best friend's moms, like growing up, we all go to each other's houses and we all called our friend's mom's mom.
Hmm.
And so it's funny when we graduated, one of us would yell out like mom, and all of a sudden like eight moms would turn like, what do you guys need? But it
Yeah.
was just like the group of us just went from house to house to house to house. But this one house I spent a lot of time at with one of my best friends, and their parents helped raise us like through high school, and they're very loving, but the husband's just a lot of health things going on. And we got to run into her at our nephew's football game. and we get to catch up a little bit, which is always awesome. And she just mentioned to me, and she has every right to be in a victim mindset or mentality if she chose to. And she's not. She's working, she's helping out with her husband, she's doing all the house maintenance and chores and being a grandma and being a mom. And she just said, when we're at the hospital for all these different appointments that we have, I sit here and I read your book and I highlight it. And the nurses, they ask me about it. And she's like, and I go to certain parts and it helps me get through that. And it like brought tears in my eyes because like, here's a woman that I adore and I love her. And she's served us for so many years, and being able to like serve her in such a small way, but also like just like being proud that she could be sitting there, woe is me. I'm tired. I worked all day, ran around to appointments, painted the house, did this, did that. And instead she's like, I'm doing well.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible.
She's like the queen of having a hope and champion mindset.
Yeah.
She's awesome. I feel like we don't have enough time and it's not the place, but I feel like we could have a full like 60-minute episode on just like her and the triumphs that she has and just like her perspective throughout life. She's an all-star. So shout out to mom.
Yeah. Yeah. She's a lot of adversity, but is so joyful and just changing the world with what she does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, listeners, we hope that you enjoyed this episode, and if you did and you know someone that is struggling with this like woe is me and you love them and it's not like rude, maybe send this over to them, because I think that I know there's a couple people in my life that I'm going to send this episode to because I know that it will benefit them. But also I'd love to hear what your mantra is. If you picked one, send us a DM and let us know what it is, and we'll share it maybe on future episodes or something like that, or at least with clients and people who might need a different mantra than what we shared. So thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. And we all need, like Brandy was saying earlier, community and support. And that support needs to be friends that are willing to do the hard things. And the hard things are talking truth to us when we're not living up to our best selves, that they can help hold us accountable. Those are the friends that you really want to hang on to. Like, you want those people in your life. So definitely become that friend. Also make sure that you have those friends I have those friends.
Same.
And then I get to be that friend for others.
Yeah.
So make sure that you're being served, but you're also serving. And that's what keeps the cup full to chug it again, wrapping it back to that. But have a great week. And remember, every day is not just a day to be hopeful, but an opportunity to become hope.
The Hope Not Know podcast is meant for educational, informational, and personal development purposes only and does not constitute any health or medical advice. If you're looking for specific advice, connect with us to work with a Hope coach. The Hope Not Know podcast shall not be liable or responsible for any loss or damage allegedly arising from any information or suggestions in this podcast.